Welcome back to another episode of Root Notes.
Let's do this.
Yeah. David, my phone has been blowing up with notifications about something you did on TikTok. What is going on, man?
All right. This is not a flex, y'all. This is surprising because I don't have this kind of TikTok. I got a very small following on TikTok. It's all public health people. By the way, it's a cool little community. Much love. Oh, yeah. And Marla, MPH.
Oh, yeah.
She gave us a shout out. She gave the pod a shout out on her TikTok. She has twice as many followers as I do, for instance. And so thank you, Marla. Really appreciated that.
Yeah,
and all the love we got there.
That was
but
cool,
yeah,
man.
so it's mostly for people. I mean, I put in some videos of me and my son, and then I put up a bunch of talking head stuff about public health.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I have a video with a few thousand views, it's amazing, right? And it's like, wow, that thing blew up. Well, over the past 28 hours or so, I've had cumulative, like almost now 25,000 views on a series of videos that I did. One video alone has right at 15,000 views. Y'all, that does not happen. I don't know what happened. And so, yeah, so the little thing happened on TikTok.
What the heck was it, man? Like I saw it and I just got to know what the story is behind. How did you end up with these videos and these topics? I mean, just walk me through this.
So what had happened was,
It's like
you know how these things happen. What happened was I was working this weekend. Is my custom, unfortunately, too many weekends. And I was working to get ready for some lectures that I've got coming up this week. And it is at the heart of public health, like one of our basic competencies is to teach on structural racism and health.
Right.
And so it's just something that's like is very basic. It's not a specific to our university thing. It's all public health programs teach
That's
this.
right. Yeah.
So I'm about to do that lecture this week with our first year students. And so I was trying to think of some ways to I've been doing a very similar talk for about 10 years. And so I'm just trying to think of like, what can I do to really put a different spin on it? Meanwhile, I saw this video from a guy that I follow named Dan McClellan. Shout out to Dan McClellan.
Yeah,
He's a Bible scholar who does a lot of just public scholarship around his area of religion and biblical studies. My next door neighbor turned me on to him. My next door neighbor is a biblical scholar, and he got a shout out from Dan one time, or maybe several times at this point.
That's cool.
So anyway, all of these are the dots connecting. Well, Dan does this response video. His videos are always about religion. And he does this response video to a guy who's talking about racism. And I was like, what? And so Dan did this pretty nice and elaborate response. But what happened in this video is that there was a pastor, and I didn't really know who he was. He's got a huge following as well. He's this pastor, large church in Dallas, and he is talking about the whole woke DEI kind of thing. And he lays out this list of absurd things. And what happened was I do a very similar thing in my course where I lay out all these things like you wouldn't believe this is connected to racism. But this guy's list was better than mine. And so I'm watching it going, oh, and so the whole time he's going through this list going, these things are so ridiculous. I'm going, actually, there's a really cool story about that. And so it inspired me to do a series of 6 little TikTok videos, 2 minutes each, responding to his list. And then, it kind of went from there.
Kind of blew up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's cool. You got a shout out from Dan. And man, his podcast is awesome. Data Over Dogma is super cool. I follow that.
He's cool. I mean, Dan liked my stuff. I don't know if that's a shout out.
Well,
that's probably he liked it.
Well,
he liked this post.
That's more than I ever got. So I pulled up this TikTok video that that you talked about. I watched it and I've got it. I'm going to cue it up and I'm going to let our listeners.
Let me set this up with this statement.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not coming for this guy. Like, I don't know anything about him. If there's a reason to hate him, I don't know it. So I'm not interested in the dude or his platform or any of that, really. what he gives, I think, in this list is a really relatable list. Like if I'm just talking to my family at a barbecue, then there would be a lot of people that I'm related to going like, I don't know if that doesn't make any sense to me. And I get it. And so when I heard him say this, I was like, oh, yeah, if you're not sitting in my class, I could totally understand why this wouldn't make any sense. But I wonder if I could make it make sense for people. And so just when you're listening to this video, please know, like, I'm not trying to aim hate at whoever this guy is.
Okay, let's check it out.
Anywhere that there was any inequality of outcomes for groups, that must be injustice. So we'll just do these really fast. These were the most absurd ones. So highways, racist, totally racist. Highways are racist. Obviously, exercise, very racist. Exercise. The unbearable whiteness of camping, racist.
Wait a second.
Do you guys know that? Who, me, bias? Look at the bottom. Peanut butter, jelly, and racism. Peanut butter and jelly, very racist, white supremacist. Is coffee racist? How drinking coffee perpetuates white supremacy. Coffee. Racist. Okay, when I screenshotted this, I was like dying. I remember where I was when I screenshotted this. The Washington Post, the racist legacy birds carry. Every bird you see, racist.
Yes.
Okay, so and here's what we're doing. We're treating foolish things as foolish.
So this is the list that when I heard him via Dan's response to it, when I heard the list, I was like, ooh. Dan was sort of responding in a different way, but I was, because this guy's a pastor, so Dan was responding from like the biblical, religious,
theological
stance. Right? But I heard it from like a public health, like, oh my gosh, this is a good list, and so I just wanted to respond. So that's what happened on TikTok.
So, wow, where do you want to start? I mean,
so let's start where he ended. So he ended on this like, oh my gosh, I knew where I was when I heard it, when I screenshot it because it was so crazy. And what he says is every bird you see is racist. Now, like with a lot of these, he read a headline clearly and not an article. And even the headline here, he misreads. Yeah. Because what this article is about is how birds' names carry a legacy of racism, not the birds themselves. But I want to start here because this is a video that maybe by the time we finish this conversation tonight, it'll have over 15,000 views on my TikTok, which doesn't happen. So this one caught fire. People were really interested in this. And what's so obvious here is that a story needs to be told to make this make sense, right? Because if you just say to people, yeah, there's a big relationship between birds and racism, then you're like, what? But if I said that a person sold a child who was not white to be killed and eaten by other people so that he could watch it and make drawings of it, I think it'd be pretty easy to convince you that that was racist. And one of the article's stories is about a guy doing exactly that, who birds are named after. Or the story I talk about in my TikTok is not even that story. The story I talk about is a little guy you might have heard of called Audubon, like the Audubon Society.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard of that.
John James Audubon was a great artist and a horrible person in so many ways, because he not only was himself an enslaver, like he had slaves and he defended slavery, but he also, and this is what's really important in the class that I teach, he was a proponent of something called scientific racism. And listeners, if you don't know what that is, it's this idea in the 19th century that races of humans were kind of like species of humans, and that you could do these measurements and you can measure like skulls to be able to show
brain size. Yeah.
Right. That brains of white people were bigger because their skulls were bigger. And that's why they were literally biologically superior. And the point that I make in the video about this is, while that has its origins in the 19th century and might feel like a really antiquated way to think, in 2016, and this is just an example, we could cite other studies, at the University of Virginia's medical school. If you're not in this space, you might not know, UVA has a really nice medical school. It is difficult to get in there. And brother, this article details the fact that almost half of their medical students in their training believed that people with black skin had thicker skin and therefore felt pain differently. Now, that's not something they got out of modern science. That has its roots in scientific racism that goes all the way back to the 19th century. That has its roots in people like Audubon. So the true story about like what do birds have to do with racism is a really interesting story about these guys that were really captivated by detailing all of these species. Part of their motivation was also to detail what was different about these humans that they wanted to dehumanize.
Yeah.
And so it's this powerful story. Like nobody supports that. Like I can't imagine that many people would want to get behind that. It's clearly racist, and it lives on in the names of lots and lots of birds.
Wow. I mean,
right?
This is the second time we've talked about birds on a podcast recently. The first time was much more fun. Birds
are awesome. The birds aren't racist.
The birds, well, they're not racist, but they don't like me. I can't tell you at some point I'll tell you the story about the seagull that got me on the beach. But yeah, this is super interesting and kind of heartbreaking. Like when I think about like half, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of half of medical students think that people with brown skin feel pain less.
Yeah.
The implications of that for treatment, for the way in which they're going to be perceived, oh my.
And you and I both know this isn't theoretical.
No, this is
because the data's there also about prescribing patterns and differences and whether or not you're taking pain seriously when it's a white patient versus a black patient in the exam room. And so these different responses have these deep roots.
Sure.
We didn't get here yesterday. We got here on a story that started quite a long time ago. And the more we're aware of that story, the better we can do in responding to it. And that's one of the things that when you and I get a chance to work with students who are not monolithic in their thinking in any way. I mean, the students who come into our program, a lot of times they're sort of faith motivated. They want to get into it because they feel a calling to do this work. Many of our students are much more conservative than the average public health student at other universities might be. And you and I work in rural communities all the time where we work hand in hand, side by side, elbow to elbow with conservative people all the time. And it is the nature of our work to be able to help people see sort of the common ground. And when I tell people these kind of stories, it actually usually helps open up to go, okay, I thought this whole like woke thing was sort of out of hand, but what you're telling me makes sense. This legacy, I can understand how it still impacts people. And that's the reason I wanted to get on TikTok and just make those videos, because I was hoping that it might be shedding light where sometimes there's just all heat, no light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there was a study done not long ago that talked about how the average person who shares an article on Facebook, they don't read the article. They read the headline and then they post it and then they comment about it. I mean, that's kind of what we're watching this guy do, really.
Well, and let me just tease. This is a podcast to listen all the way to the end of it, because the last one that we're going to deal with is that, and it's really kind of funny what happened, what he exposed himself doing. I mean, again, this is not about that dude, but it was pretty clear. I was like, the peanut butter and jelly one, because I'm hearing all these other things and I already know what the stories are. Like when he's talking about these birds, I'm like, oh no, this is Audubon. And he's going through it, and then the peanut butter and jelly one, I was like, I don't know the racist angle on peanut butter and jelly. And so I won't spoil it yet, but that one's pretty funny.
Okay. So he had a list.
He had a list. You want to hit them real quick and just talk about some of the things?
Let's talk about it. So you started with birds. I think you talked about highways. Now that one, that's an easier one for me to understand. But as you said, we've taught this for years. We talk about this. We work with communities that live live in the experience of the impact of the way in which neighborhoods have been designed and highways have been built. So that would make sense to me, but it may not make sense to everyone. So talk to me about that.
No. And we won't belabor any of these, but just to make sure that we're telling these stories too, and giving people a chance to think about this. So again, you said it right. You and I work in the space where we literally teach people on a graphic organizer to think about, as a driver of health, the built environment. But hardly anybody in society is thinking about that. So if you're not thinking about it, it seems ridiculous that highways could be racist. But the truth is, we don't build highways randomly. We decide where a highway is going to go through. And before I talk about the racism, you and I work really closely on rural health and rural health equity. Rural communities, rural farms have been abused by the same practice, by the way, where your livelihood can be very disrupted because the most convenient place for other people to put this road goes right through your livelihood.
Yeah.
And so land use is a big deal in rural health, which we live and breathe. Well, it's also a big deal in the history of where, starting in the 1950s and 60s, if not before, when the interstate program rolled out, and it had a lot of good. But what would happen is they would roll interstates right through thriving Black communities.
Yep.
And so there are stories to be told all over this country. And I just listed a few. I listed like Miami and New Orleans. Here in North Carolina, where we live and work, the city of Durham, the Hayti district in Durham was this thriving Black center of commerce and just a thriving neighborhood and community. And you can go online and read stories about how the Durham Freeway just bulldozed through and not only like bulldozed things in the community, but cut the community off from itself. When you run a big road right through things, then all of a sudden now I'm on the other side of a highway from my church or a grocery store. And it might or might not be easy for me to get to the other side of those huge trucks that are whizzing by.
Sure.
And so that history is not accidental. We made choices as a society, and what we chose to do is exploit communities with little power. And that were already grouped together because of previous segregation, right? And so those things, and then when you fast forward, what does that mean for today? Well, if you live near a highway, you have more exposure to air pollution, higher asthma rates in those areas. None of this is conjecture. This is all data. And of course, there's the whole issue of your connection to other social drivers like food access. And so those things have a racist history and have a racist present.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that throws off people like Josh when he's making this list is he thinks about racism in terms of like this bad thing that I do as a human to another human on the basis of skin color or something. That can be racism, but it's actually in the way that we talk about it in class, kind of the least important type of racism to talk about, because these other things are so much more insidious because they're operating all the time and they sort of operate below the surface. And it's not really one actor. It's not a matter. Like one time somebody said, racism is a heart thing. And I'm like, yeah, except for systems don't always have hearts.
Wow. Yeah. That's a cool quote.
So highways have a racist history, and it's pretty easy to document.
Yeah. So exercise. You talked about exercise being racist. Now, I think there's a lot to be said about sort of perceptions and recommendations between providers and patients and all that sort of stuff. And we can unpack that.
Yeah.
But we just got through talking about highways and built systems and built environment. I think that connects to this as well. So talk to me a little bit about exercise and how exercise is racist.
Yeah. So our podcast is not usually very data heavy, and I feel like I've been like rolling out a bunch of numbers. And let me give you a story. So I was at a community meeting here in this county, and this is several years ago. We were just thinking about, what makes our community a great place to live, what can make it a better place to live. Mm-hmm. It's a conversation that if you're going to do the work of public health, you should do a lot. You should listen to people who are not at agencies, who live in communities, tell you what's great about this community and what can make it better. So you and I try to practice what we preach there. And so I'm just listening to people, and this woman says, there were reporters there. She wasn't grandstanding. She's just being honest. And she said, a lot of white neighborhoods are starting to get parks for their dogs, and we don't have parks for our kids. So wow. Josh, when you're listening in your list, exercise and the racism that might be embodied in this notion of exercise, that's part of what we're talking about. Does your community, and again, getting back to what we were just talking about, the communities don't happen by accident. Does your community have safe places for you to be active? Now, if you don't have safe places to be active, or if you do have safe places to be active, a person still has to decide to be active. But when you don't have a safe place to do it, the chances you do it are really low. And we know that through data. And what we also know is that this woman's comment, I put on the TikTok video that I did in response to this one, a map of the city of Chicago where it showed the location of the dog parks. Mm-hmm. And they're all in these white neighborhoods. And it's all over these white neighborhoods. It's making this woman's point. She wasn't talking from data. She was talking from experience. And she was telling truths that you could back up in data. And so then you think about, like, is there investments in greenways? Is there investments in trails? Are there parks and playgrounds? Like the differences that exist in the built environments there are what I really highlighted in my video. But I'll tell you, Wes, one of the cool things is that people responded to that video in the comments and were like, that's not all, man. They were like, there's also these different expectations that you have and judgments that you feel when you walk into workout spaces, if you're not the normal clientele. And these are people giving firsthand accounts of, like, when I walk into a yoga studio, I am not welcomed. I do not feel welcome because I'm not usually there. People that look like me aren't usually there. And I didn't really talk about that at all in my video, but people shared their stories in response. And so I think all of those things sort of are telling stories that are just different stages of the same legacy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And, thinking about sort of exercise and the way people are perceived, the way people receive recommendations from providers, we know that often providers have a different interaction of someone with a different race. This isn't necessarily something that is overt. It's implicit. We're going to talk a little bit about that, I think. But what we know is true is that Black patients, Latino patients, when we are getting recommendations from the provider, they very often withhold those recommendations or don't seriously counsel patients on physical fitness, on exercise, because they make the assumption that they're not going to comply. And they make that assumption about lots of different aspects of health, but this one particularly, they make the assumption that they're not going to comply.
Yeah, and and even if they so in addition to that data, there's this phenomenon where providers will recommend sort of the standard thing. Yeah, you should walk for half an hour, without thinking about the context. And so that one of the things I talk about all the time with rural health is when I live in rural. And so if you tell me I should, hey, running's good, you should get back to running, go, get back to your distance running. I'm running on no shoulder on the side of a road. I'm not running on a greenway. I'm not running on a sidewalk. They don't exist out here. No. North Carolina actually has the most dangerous rural roads in America, and you're asking me to run on the lack of shoulder with cars whizzing by me at least 55 miles an hour. That's the reality. Now, if you told me the same recommendation, but I lived in Cary, an urban area that has great greenways, and it's a totally different thing to live out. And that's sort of the point that we're making, is that if you have, as a result of sort of segregation, redlining, and racist past, create neighborhoods that are where there's disinvestment in safe places to be active, and then you say as a provider, oh, and you should really try to get outside and get some exercise, the burden you're giving that patient is to figure out where to do that. Because what they don't have is the ability to do what I could do if I lived in an apartment in Cary, which is hop on a greenway.
That's right. And there aren't local gyms nearby. There's certainly not a YMCA that's accessible. Is it affordable? All those questions, right? And there's no doubt in my mind that when someone makes a statement like this, that exercise is racist and that's absurd, they haven't stopped long enough to think about it, to read about it, to do any sort of critical analysis.
Well, and again, it's not like when you pick up your dumbbell, you're not being racist. But the question is, do we have a society where we have created opportunity for people to exercise in realistic ways?
Yeah, that's right. Also, you're not just running on no shoulder on dangerous rural roads. You're doing it barefoot, which is questionable.
Podcast.
That's a questionable podcast. Activity is what I'll say. I would call it ill-advised. All right. So that's exercise.
Yeah.
Coffee. Now
this one, I bet this one more people could guess.
Mm-hmm.
And he really had fun with it in the video. Like, yep, drinking that coffee is racist. That's not really it. The history of coffee is pretty clear. I mean, if you've bought fair trade coffee before, well, what is being communicated in that label? Well, what is being communicated is that there's a real alternative to that most of us have been drinking for a long, long, long time. And this is one that felt a little bit personal for me as I was telling the story, because, as you know, I've done work in some of these countries. Like for a couple of years, I took students to Guatemala to work with indigenous folks in rural Guatemala. But for a number of years, I spent a lot of time in rural Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did in the video is I talked about the stories of those two countries as examples of just where race comes in. So a lot of times when we're talking about racism, we don't spend enough time talking about indigenous folks. And, I love the tribal communities around us here in North Carolina. Well, indigenous folks in Guatemala, the coffee industry pushed them off. It was coffee wealth. The coffee business was about dispossession. For them. And so they were pushed off the land into these low-wage jobs where they were raising crops all day and going to bed hungry. That was, and all of the profits were going to U.S. companies. And then I told the story of, and to this day, I mean, I am not a tall man. Is that fair to say?
You said it, not me.
Now on the podcast, you're going to decide to step back off that.
Well, here's what I
you
said.
routinely call me a homunculus.
No. Well, let me put it like this. You gave the keynote address at the white coat ceremony last week, and someone said, I think our speaker is going to be short, and I said, yeah, he's a little guy.
That was way too much setup for the payoff on that joke. All right, just for the record.
Okay.
But okay, that's what I was expecting, by the way. All right, so I'm, just for the record, I'm I'm like 5'7", all right?
You're a short king.
I'm a short king, except for in Guatemala. And all of a sudden that joke feels real weird because I'm walking around Guatemala City and I'm looking over everybody's head. And this is a phenomenon that sticks out to me because this is not the way in which I inhabit the world. I've traveled a lot of places. I'm not usually the tallish one. And it's because of stunting, like the malnourishment. Yeah. And so this is a place that is the breadbasket of the world for things like coffee. And yet it is very difficult for people to get enough to eat. And so you have these massive malnourishment problems. Well, in Haiti, it's a different racist story. What happened is in Haiti, in the 1700s, Haiti was the leading exporter of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But then Haiti is the first black nation to throw off oppressors and become its own nation. A lot of people don't know that. Haiti's the first nation in the world. The response from Europe, particularly France, of course, and the United States, is to punish them with unbelievable debt. If you want to look this up, there's only a bajillion things you can read about it. It's well documented. And basically it crushes the economy. And then there's trade isolation that pushes Haiti out of the coffee market. So its people had proven that they could do this. The land had the capacity, and they basically just shut the markets off in response to them liberating themselves. And this is a ripple effect through. And if you get down to Haiti, you can get really good coffee down there, but it's hard to buy in the States because of that legacy continues to this day. And I could tell you story after story just because I know those people and became acquainted with the history of how those kind of practices have kept that particular country down. And so when you look at these histories, that's not accidental. There is this huge racial component that has ripple effects across generations and across borders. And now when people from Guatemala or Haiti immigrate to the United States, a lot of those health impacts that we're talking about come with them. Mm-hmm. And then it's compounded by things like racism and exclusion that they meet here. And so these things are all bound up in the story of coffee.
Wow. So
now you see, like when this is all stuff that's just sitting in my head. So when I hear this list going through and I'm going, oh my gosh, I want to tell the truth about what's going on with all of this. The last real one, and then we'll do PB&J.
Okay. All right.
So the last real one is camping. I was really excited to tell this story because I love North Carolina. And what I chose to talk about here with camping is, a lot of times camping can be associated with things you do when you're young, and particularly with Scouts.
Yeah.
The first Black Boy Scout troop was founded in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And do you know what year it was founded, Wes?
Only because I saw your TikTok video.
Oh, you saw it. You watched my stuff? I can't believe that. All right. 1911. Mm-hmm. More than 100 years ago. So I don't even know if I did a good job of expressing this in the video. But what excites me about telling this story is more than 100 years ago, that's Black families going, we really want to participate in this. Mm-hmm. This is important. We want to fight for the opportunity to do this, which I think runs so counter to the narrative about Black folks, Black communities, and camping and scouting and stuff like that. Over 100 years ago, people were saying, no, this is something we want to do. The problem is, once they establish that, and there are troops that pop up all over the country, they're not the response to those Boy Scout troops, like so many things in America, is that they were segregated and underfunded. Yep. They weren't allowed to have the same uniforms in some cases, or weren't allowed to get the same merit badges. And just the cascade of, but not the same. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to find pictures online of segregated campgrounds where the best camping opportunities were whites only for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're pitching a tent with your kiddos and you're having a good time, that's not being racist. But the truth is, the fact that if you look around, it might not look like America, that has a racist history of exclusion that leads us to where we are now. And I had somebody write in a comment on that video. It was really powerful. She said, similar things happen with swimming. And I went, yes, similar things did happen with swimming. So if you have in your mind, like, swimming's not a Black thing, you have to remember that pools for a very long time were not accessible by people. And you and I do, you know what we do? We do the things we grew up doing, and the things that our parents did. And like, what we do for fun is not random. Yeah. That's right. My partner, she's from Texas. She's never been skiing. She didn't grow up going snowboarding or skiing, right? That's because that's not what her people did in the desert.
Right, the desert
right?
of Texas.
And we do what our people just did. But here's
Sure.
the problem. If segregation and the laws of segregation help set up what you and your people, your family did, then even when those laws are removed, that has a trickle down effect in generations. And so while it would be way safer, for instance, if more black folks knew how to swim or participating in the exercise of swimming, it'd be better for health pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that a lot of folks are doing because of generations back. It's not what we were allowed to do. So even when you remove segregation, it still has this really insidious effect.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. But in terms of sort of the cultural expectation, like I can't tell you the number of times I've heard a black comedian talk about like camping, like black folks don't camp, and they're laughing about it in a way that they make some levity out of it. But Trevor Noah talks about it. I mean, he's got a really funny bit about it. But it underlies sort of this we were never expected or allowed to be a part of this, and so we reject it because even if we have the opportunity to do it, we're not expected to do it.
Yeah.
And so would we be welcome to do it? I mean, you and I, like, we've got a camping trip scheduled, right? In a few weeks here. Super excited about that. Maybe we'll record a little podcast on the trail. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I mean, we've done it a number of times, and the Uwharrie National Forest is a fantastic, beautiful resource we have right here in North Carolina. And I can promise you that if we went around and took a census, it's going to be mostly white folks
It's not going to look like America. Right, right. And that doesn't make the act of camping that we're going to enjoy racist. And I think that's what Josh was responding to. What it makes is, I think, again, we work with and love a lot of conservative folks. And it's just like, you can relate to this, right? You can relate to the fact that this story shapes who you are. You remember going camping with your grandpa, and like his grandpa before him. I love swimming in pools and going to pool parties, even though I was a poor kid growing up. But I would love going to other people's pools and pool parties as my parents did. And that if that's not your family legacy, because of racist segregation laws, that's how we all get here. Yeah. And what can we do to make that not where we have to live now? I think that's the big question. And I think that that's something that even if you're not particularly excited about woke or DEI or any of these things, when you start thinking about the context, I feel like people can find common ground around that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, well, we'll come back to it because I'm thinking about sort of advertisements, right, for like camping stuff, tents and sleeping bags. I'm thinking about advertisements for coffee. I'm thinking about advertisements for gyms, right? Like what we reinforce through our media, whether it's intentional or not, perpetuates these same sort of stereotypes. Yeah. And it means that I'm not reflected in it. It's not meant for me. The expectation is that I not be part of this. And it just makes it even more insidious.
I think you're right, but I also oftentimes suggest to our students, and I don't know, listeners, see what you think. I think you're right, except for I also think that marketing companies get this better than our societal structures do. In other words, if you see a commercial about camping, it's much more likely to be diverse than actual camping is. Or if you see like, people in a yoga studio on television, it's much more likely to be diverse than an actual yoga studio near you.
That's only true very recently.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Let's be like growing up. If you were gonna go buy a Coleman tent, advertisement was a white family in flannel.
100%. You're exactly right. But I think recently the marketing side does not reflect the reality because we haven't changed the harder things to change, which is how do we encourage some of these things to not continue to be true, like they were shaped to be true in the 50s or 60s or before.
Now, I'll bring up an example that's not specifically about race, but is about bias in advertisement. One of the most recent examples that I use in class is actually about gender. It's about the way we think about gender roles. And so there's a Delta had this app, and they were advertising it for folks to be able to change their flight or track their luggage or whatever. The picture of the white guy in the business suit, his flight just got canceled, but we've got you covered, important white businessman. Just hit the button on the app and we've got you rescheduled and on another flight to your important thing.
Yeah.
Fine. They had another one for women, and it was a woman sitting in the seat, smiling at her phone, and it says, "Be able to track your shoes at all times."
No.
Yes.
Are you serious right now?
Yes. Yes. The same app, the exact same sort of. Yes, this is very recent. Recently enough that there were smartphones and the Delta app, so you could do these things.
Yeah.
So I just want to point out that that bias in marketing is still very real. I don't think they probably sat down and said, let's make a very stark distinction between the way we market this, but it was implicit, which brings me to peanut butter and jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly. All right. So I teased this early on. In his list, it's in the middle, but I had to save it for last because this is the one I was like, peanut butter and jelly. And it does stick out. So all of the other ones are a little bit more associated with the actual thing. And this one, I dug into. I was like, what is the peanut butter and jelly relationship? Well, he clearly did not read this article. The headline does talk about peanut butter and jelly. What it is an analogy. And it works like this. Listeners, if you're thinking about peanut butter, there's a real good chance that you're also going to cognitively associate the concept of jelly. Like, it's hard to think about peanut butter and not also think about jelly. And what this writer was doing in the article that was referenced is not saying that your peanut butter and jelly sandwich is really racist, but rather, you know how it's hard to think about peanut butter without thinking about jelly? Well, our brains do that kind of connections in ways that are really problematic when it comes to race or country folk, people that speak with Southern accents, or along gender line. Like, there are lots of associations we make between categories of people and negative stereotypes. And the reason that Josh just happened to like into some territory that I was like, ooh, let me respond to this, because I literally wrote my dissertation on this issue of the association in our brains between negative stereotypes and group identity. But to not get dissertation-like about it, just thinking about, okay, so if, for instance, why is this relevant for public health and why would I respond to it? Well, because I'm going to let you take the healthcare example, but think about landlords. If landlords associate black renters with risky, which is an association with a negative stereotype, then they might be less likely to rent or rent under different terms, et cetera, et cetera. We know this, by the way, through data. So when I was talking about this on the TikTok video, I was flashing up headlines from stories about this. Or if teachers, so for a long time, I got into public health through public schooling. And for a long time, I worked on the school to prison pipeline. I worked to try to disrupt exclusionary disciplines, suspensions and expulsions that we know help create bad things in society later on. So when a student belongs to a minority race, is minoritized, then the association in the teacher's mind might be disruption with this group identity, negative stereotype of disruption or unruly with that, which makes them more likely to be suspended or expelled in school. And we know that in data for now a long time.
That's right.
So those associations is what's being highlighted in the peanut butter and jelly article. And there's really nothing funny about that. And it's actually one of the things that most of this, we're talking about history and story and legacies of segregation, that kind of thing. And this is really talking about us. Because the truth is, all of us carry these associations in our minds because it's just the way that minds work.
That's right.
And unfortunately, we're all growing up around this social scripting that tells me that women are like this, that country folk are like this, that black folks are like this. And whether we like it or not, some of that stuff sticks.
That's right. Yeah,
And you actually did grand rounds at a local healthcare system to talk about implicit bias and healthcare.
Yeah.
And when I was making the video, I actually thought about you.
Yeah.
The work that you did there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're echoing everything we talked about that day. There's really powerful examples that we could talk about in rurality, the way popular media portrays rural folks, right, as backwards, as dumb, as racist, even, and all of these sorts of things. There's one example I want to point out. 2005, Hurricane Katrina. There was an image captured in the Associated Press, and the image was young black kid, had food, bottles, things like that under his arm, wading through chest deep water. And the caption says, young resident wading through chest deep water after looting grocery store. The same day, a similar photo of two white folks with bread and things like that wading through chest deep water was posted. And the caption said, two residents wade through chest deep water after finding food.
Yeah.
And that example is a pretty classic example of sort of implicit bias, because when the folks who wrote those captions were asked about it, the one who wrote the looting, right, said, I never meant to imply. I didn't mean to, right? And that's the whole point of implicit bias. It's operating right under the hood.
Yeah.
And we know that when patients are interacting with providers, those providers bring to that interaction their full human experience. Everything you are, everything you've encountered, your implicit biases are at work. And the data shows us that this is the case. We can measure it in a lot of different ways, but one of the simplest ways to measure it is actually time spent with patient.
Yeah.
And our students use sort of this national data to look at the differences between time spent with patient, the way in which patients are treated for the same disease or disorder, like depression and anxiety. We know by a long shot that African American patients are far less likely to be prescribed SSRIs, or even necessarily be referred to counseling because of the assumptions made by the provider. I mean, we've got example after example, like the data is real, it's there. And it has a real economic cost, not just the terrible outcomes for the patients, but like there's something along the lines of like $310 billion each year. That is the economic burden that we all share because Black patients get less, spend less time with physicians. They don't get the same treatments. I mean, all of the actual economic burden of this is very real also. And so if you want to deny the data in terms of the stuff we can look at for time spent with patient, when the dollars hit, it should it should get your attention. In North Carolina, I mean, it's pretty stark too. So yeah, you're exactly right. Like implicit bias is definitely one of the drivers for really a lot of this.
The point that I wanted to respond with the TikTok videos, and the reason I thought this would be a good conversation for our podcast, is we are working really hard in this moment to use this pod to try to host conversations where we're looking for optimism and common ground, and how can we work together to solve the big challenges that we've got to face together. And we're speaking out of experience doing hard work with folks in rural communities. So this is important to us. And I think if you got an idea that racism is mostly about people having hate in their heart, I just think that's probably not the most useful way to think about it. I think, with this implicit bias, it's peanut butter and jelly. It's the thing that your brain is short-circuiting to do. It's like it shorts out your intentions. Your intentions might be good. You're a reporter, And your brain, because of a lot of social scripting, picks the verb looting when it could have picked the word found. And that's the problem. It's happening subconsciously. It's happening in these big systems. It happened in history, but the history is still shaping today. And I think the more we talk about hate and people's hearts, the farther we get away from solutions that might help us be a society, a community that works better for more people. And that's really the whole reason I bring it up. I think it's a pretty good list of some really creative things that aren't really that hard to tie back to racism if you really think about it.
All right, David, that's a good word. Thanks, man, for bringing that list and blowing up TikTok. That was pretty unexpected. That was a pretty unexpected turn of events. Speaking of unexpected turns, so we talk about detours worth taking on this podcast.
Yeah, real quick, I've got a fun one. If you don't know this person, you got to check it out. She's got a great Instagram. I don't know if she's on TikTok. But Dorothea Taylor. Dorothea Taylor. Do you know her, Wes?
Mm-mm.
All right. Picture in your mind the secretary from a church your church growing up. This is the lady that you should have in mind. Or maybe like the school librarian.
It's like Dana Carvey's church lady.
About to retire. Dana Carvey's church lady would be fine. Have that in your mind. And then
isn't that
see
special?
A woman absolutely tearing apart a drum set.
Oh.
This is Dorothea Taylor. She does not look the part. I've seen her play along to like Disturbed.
Okay, David, talking about implicit bias, what does a drummer look like?
Oh, I'm telling you, that's why I love this for this. She is a perfect counter to all of your expectations. If she walks in, you don't think she even plays the drum. In fact, one of those cool things, watch her videos, but then also read comments, because there are all of these 70-year-old women who are going like, I wanted to learn drums, but my family told me that's not what women did, so I played flute instead. But now I'm learning to play drums because of you. She is just unbelievably talented. She's been teaching music and drum line for decades, and it shows. She's amazing.
Wow.
You have to check it out.
All
Dorothea
right.
Taylor.
I'm going to check that out, Dorothea Taylor. I love it, man. All right, well, that's a detour worth taking. It's been a cool conversation, and I'm glad you brought it to me. I'm glad you texted me and said, change the plan. We're going to talk a little bit about TikTok.
All right. See y'all off the road.
See ya.